Hey yo guys, look what I found the other day. Really hard to tell, but can you guys see a V in it? Really hard to see. Can you see the head? What you want? Anyone want to guess? Oh, that's weird. The date? 1893. The people that first carried this bad boy in their pocket are gone, dead, fallen to the earth. These pennies right here. The people that first used these pennies, dead, gone, forever. And now I finally have them. It's so weird to have a coin that people that, like, the first people that use them have died. A lot of wheat pennies I have are, what's it called? The minimum age of a wheat penny. Let's see. 60, 70, 80, 90, 2008, 2008. 1870. Let's see, the minimum age of a wheat penny is 75 years old. That's the youngest wheat penny, and the oldest are 100 and I think 14 years. That's old right there. I mean, that's an old penny. I love wheat pennies. I don't know if there will be a stage in my life where I'll never be dissatisfied, but there'll never be a stage in my life where I'll ever be unhappy when I get wheat pennies. Anyway, we were getting metal. Sadly, we don't have white here today, but oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm not getting the ankle out. I have to ride him out. Her out. Let's see this dude's food. He's got a little food. We might need to get more, which shouldn't be that much of a problem. There's a bunch of creatures in the swamp. We should just be able to kill outright. Okay, imagine that's not my dinosaur. Imagine just me just mining a level 201 Tech-Rex just comes charging in. Yeah, I might as well get some metal right now. Oh shoot, my mystery. Crap, I literally forgot. Come on. God, I'm stuffed. Yeah, I didn't eat that much spaghetti. You know how good I feel about this game? Like, I felt like everything would be able to kill me. Now I could literally kill and conquer. I could kill like probably like at least 90% of the creatures in this game, and conquer at least 3/4 of the map. Oh, well, as long as I have my T-Rex. Oh my god. Okay, time to say something. You know how annoying. I think every timer's running out. To stay protected, keep your devices safe. Okay. Your McAfee virus will. Oh my god. The only virus I have on my computer is because so because like, you know, I get literally annoyed to the point of death from McAfee. It's annoying as hell. They just like, if you don't know what I'm talking about, there's a thing called McAfee, and they basically like are an antivirus, which is cool. But the thing is that they beg you and beg you to literally sign up for their virus. history. I don't know if I can clear it, can I? It's like, I'm that close. I'm actually not on the right mountain that I was supposed to be on. Which is funny. It's like, yeah, I know it's dumb, but I may actually keep the stone. Here's the thing, I need gunpowder, and I have a lot of charcoal. Like a ton of charcoal, actually a ton of spark powder. That's actually kind of nice for design. That if I fly out, I don't even have to drop it. It's so weird how he's literally unconscious, but he's standing up. Okay, let's see, modules, equality, power, history, American people united, whatever the heck. Chapter 20. Yeah, I might as well evenly distribute all the metal. Make sure I can actually smelt very fast. Like, I am smelting very fast. I want to make more refineries, but I'm probably just gonna hold out on that. Because look at that, I just went away and I just got like what? Bad thing is we're gonna burn more fuel, but if you really think about it, we're gonna burn this fuel eventually. Yeah, that short stop made us 70 ingots. Okay, sorry guys for the... Where's... cities, people. Yay! Finally, 1890 to 1920. Finally, an actual point of time that interests me. Yay!
Cities, peoples, cultures, 1890 to 1920. Introduction. 20.1 Hester Street. Details. A painting of a street filled with men, women and children. People stand, converse, walk, sell or buy items. Hester Street, 1905, oil on canvas, Lux, George, 1867 to 1933, / Brooklyn Museum of Art, New York, USA, the Bridgman Art Library. This 1905 painting by George Lux recreates a busy corner of the Lower East Side, then home to New York City's immigrant community. Peddlers and consumers, men and women, adults and children crowd this painting, which stresses the energy, diversity, and commerce of this bustling urban district. America's cities grew rapidly in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, both to accommodate expanded production and trade and to house masses of workers who labored on the wharves and streets and in factories.
That's the time where it really started to get
forth technological advance, running water, electric lighting and trolley lines, steel suspension. Immigration soared to remedy severe labor shortfalls in manufacturing and construction. Foreign languages and cultures, as a result, became a more prominent feature of American urban life. New economic elites sought to impart to their cities an architectural elegance and cultural gravitas that, in their minds, rivaled those of the greatest cities in history: London, Paris, Rome, Athens, and Berlin.
Athens
Their plans
grew?
transformed
I mean,
cities,
Athens
but also
exists.
brought the rich into conflict with the poor. whose presence could not be ignored. A vigorous commercial culture had taken root in working class and ethnic districts of the city, appearing in dance halls, Nickelodeons.
Area where it costs $1 nickel to get in.
In working class neighborhoods that showed early short silent films, usually lasting 15 minutes, requiring little comprehension of English, and costing only a nickel to view. 1/1 on this page.
Oh, but that was like, let's see.
And amusement parks. Exuberance rather than refinement. Adventure rather than education.
Nickel, let's see. That was like at least $1? Probably like $1 to $3 back then. Or like today. That's still pretty cheap. And Nickelodeon. That's actually how modern day Nickelodeon got its name. It's because Nickelodeons require $1 nickel to get in. Back then they'd be using exactly what I'm holding in my hand. Liberty Bees.
And these working class leisure pursuits. Young, working class women pioneered a sexual revolution, and immigrants energized cities with the diversity of their communities and cultures. The interactions among the different ethnic communities, as well as between rich and poor, made American cities sites of innovation, transformation, and conflict. In them, a new America was taking shape. Chronology. Details. A table titled Chronology. The table has 13 rows and 2 columns.
What?
The columns have the following headings from left to right. Year, event. The row entries are as follows. Row 1. Year, 1893. Event, Columbia Exposition opens. Row 2. Year, 1900. Event, Chicago joins New York City and Philadelphia as the only U.S. cities with populations exceeding 1 million. Row 3. Year, 1900 through 1914. Event, immigration averages more than 1 million per year. Row 4.
Wow, that's lucky.
Year, 1907. Event,
I doubt that many people are
Dillingham
coming
Commission
in
to
the country
study
these
immigration
days.
problems. Row 5. Year, 1907 through 1911. Event, an average of 73 of every 100 Italian immigrants returned to Italy. Row 6. Year, 1908. Event, Israel Zanwill's play, The Melting Pot, debuts. Row 7. Year, 1909. Event, immigrants and their children constitute more than 90% of labor force building and maintaining railroads. Row 8. Year, 1910. Event, black skilled tradesmen in northern cities reduced to 10% of total skilled trades workforce. Roughly 20,000 Nickelodeons dot northern cities. Row 9.
It's a lot.
Year, 1911. Event, Triangle Shirtwaist Company fire kills 146 workers.
Whoa.
Row 10. Year, 1914. Symbol, debuts. The Masses, a radical journal, begins publication. Row 11. Year, 1916. Event, Randolph Bourne publishes Transnational America. Row 12. Year, 1919. Event, Japanese farmers in California sell $67 million in agricultural goods, 10% of state's total.
If that's in back then money, that's a lot of money.
Year, 1920. Event, nation's urban population outstrips rural population for first time.
The rise of the city. Yeah, in 1920, that's when the 1900s, that's basically when things started to get really freaking cracked.
20-1. The rise of the city. Q. In what ways did urban elites seek to shape the physical and cultural character of their cities in the years between 1890 and 1910? By the late 19th century, cities were changing the face of America. Their populations, their physical size, and their capacity to transform the landscapes they inhabited dwarfed those of cities a mere 50 years earlier. The rate of urban growth was staggering. Chicago, for example, 30,000 residents in 1850 to 500,000 in 1880, 1,700,000 by 1900.
Oh my god, it tripled within 30 years.
Residents soared from 1870 to 38 in 1900. Chicago, along with New York and Philadelphia, surpassed 1 million. A new kind of building, the skyscraper, symbolized the
Yeah, that's when those things started to go up.
America's expanding urban milieu. These modern towers were made possible by the use of steel rather than stone in the framework and by the invention of electric-powered elevators. Impelled upward by rising real estate values, they were intended to evoke the same sense of grandeur as Europe's Gothic cathedrals. But these monuments celebrated man, not God, material wealth, not spiritual riches, science, not faith. Reaching into the sky, dwarfing Europe's cathedrals, they were convincing embodiments of America's urban might. If advances in construction made possible the vertical reach of America's urban areas, technological advances encouraged horizontal expansion. Most important in this regard was the application of electricity to urban transportation systems. Between 1890 and 1920, virtually every major city built electric-powered transit systems to replace horse-drawn trolleys and carriages.
Trolleys.
By 1912, some 40,000 miles of electrical railway and trolley track had been laid. In Boston, electricity made possible the construction of the first subways in 1897, and New York and Philadelphia soon followed suit. As a result of these transportation improvements, it now became possible for urban dwellers to live miles away from where they worked. As recently as the 1870s, many of America's urban centers had been walking cities. Walking cities.
Basically, like
Compact residential areas near working districts with different income and ethnic groups living in close proximity. 1/5 on this page next. They were compact entities with residential areas abutting work districts and different income and ethnic groups living in close proximity to each other. By the 1890s, these walking cities had given way to metropolitan entities with core areas of work and commerce, downtowns, now surrounded by expanding rings of residential areas offering inhabitants their own homes and gardens and the promise of tree-lined streets. The intensifying congestion, dirt, poor air, and poverty of urban cores impelled the more affluent residents of these areas to seek homes in the
you're not going to do anything. Get out of here.
on the periphery. In some cases, these areas were jurisdictionally separate from cities, becoming prototypes of the independent 20th century suburb. Mine, Massachusetts, a town southwest of Boston, and Evanston, Illinois, a town north of Chicago, were two early examples of this phenomenon. In other urban centers, the new residential districts arose as part of the cities themselves. The old cores, meanwhile, increasingly became home to the poor, to immigrants, and to racial minorities. Changes in cities below ground matched those going on above. None were more important than water and sewage systems. By 1900, Chicago was pumping 500 million gallons per day to its inhabitants through 1,900 miles of water pipes. Another 1,500 miles of sewage pipe carried used water and other waste products.
Oh, did I tell you that Chicago had a problem with sewage and stuff? Because they were literally on the water line of, what's it called? Lake Michigan. So, how they do it? Instead of destroying everything, they just... I'm not joking. I'm not capping when I say this. They jacked the entire damn city up. Like, it was so bad that sewage lines ran in the streets. Like, basically, almost like giant hoses, like a garden hose. But a big boy, like 2-3 feet in diameter. But they carried sewage. That's how bad this point got. And they basically just jacked their city up with jacks. And buildings were moved with people in them. Entire building. This isn't like today, where like no, they just had like a few hundred jacks. There's a quick review about it. They had a few hundred jacks, a few hundred men. They just rotated the entire building. It's badass.
Chicagoan house household.
It's the only cool thing about Chicago, basically.
39 gallons that Chicago and other American cities were pumping a day for each inhabitant, or the 20 to 40 gallons per capita that German cities were distributing to their residents. The scale and power of these water systems made flush toilets and bathtubs standard equipment in virtually every American middle-class urban home by 1900. Such improvements came also into the urban poor. In cities such as Pittsburgh, for example, water supplies and water pressure were much steadier in prosperous than in poor neighborhoods. As late as the First World War, a significant percentage of working-class families still lacked running water in their homes. Still, America's urban poor had better access to running water than did their counterparts in Europe. These water systems reflected engineering prowess. In New York City, a network of aqueducts that one historian has described as the greatest project in water engineering since the Roman Empire carried water in tunnels that were more than 13 feet in diameter, a distance of 30 miles from upstate reservoirs. If measured by their ability to procure, pump, and carry away huge volumes of water, these American systems were unrivaled in the world. These waterworks impressed less when measured by efforts to control costs, to ensure the safety of workers building tunnels and aqueducts, and to enhance public health. The construction and administration of these projects occurred within political systems that were often corrupt. City and state officials expected to receive kickbacks for awarding contracts. Some regarded the size of the kickback as a more important consideration in choosing a contractor than the firm's competence or the prudent use of taxpayer monies. Those in charge of designing and building this infrastructure often did not do enough to protect laborers from the hazards of working underground, to ensure that consumers used the water efficiently, or to protect local lakes, rivers, and
no one gave an F about the environment at this point.
In Chicago in 1882, the city's polluted water triggered a typhoid fever outbreak that killed more than 20,000 people. In some cities, non-bacterial contaminants compromised water quality, limiting its use for drinking. One Philadelphia newspaper reported in 1895 that the local water tasted like a solution of gum boots and coal tar. By 1900, the problems caused by contaminated water had begun to recede. Urban governments were installing water filtration systems and developing safer processes for sewage disposal and treatment. Newly paved roads reduced the amount of dirt, mud, and stagnant pools of water on city streets and thus further curtailed the spread of disease. As a result, urban mortality rates began to fall. Advances in water systems, transportation, and housing reflected a growing commitment in America's urban centers to improving the lives of urban dwellers. This commitment extended well beyond questions of physical well-being to those of education and morals. In the late 19th century, urban elites launched major campaigns for cultural improvement. Symphonies, opera companies, museums, and libraries sprouted in countless cities, often housed in imposing buildings that transformed the urban landscape. In New York, Cleveland, and Philadelphia, these cultural institutions, designed in conjunction with new urban parks, anchored ambitiously conceived districts meant to be places where city dwellers might escape the struggles of daily life and cultivate their higher sensibilities. Thus, in New York City, the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the American Museum of Natural History appeared in the 1870s alongside Central Park, the first landscaped public park in the United States. The park's principal designer, Frederick Law Olmsted, principal designer of Central Park in New York City.
Wait, I would say that
next.
somewhat sounds familiar. That guy's pretty important.
Masterpiece with its 5 million.
He's like a park god.
As a refuge from the city, a place where people may stroll for an hour, seeing, hearing, and feeling nothing of the bustle and jar of the streets. If these same people took another hour to sample the art and culture on display at the Metropolitan Museum and the American Museum of Natural History, both located at the edges of so much Olmsted's success with New York parks gave him an opportunity to replicate it in numerous other cities,
American Museum of Natural History, hell yeah.
Its influence on American urban landscapes. Urban elites of the late 19th century were drawn to Beaux Arts architecture, a Paris-based style that merged neoclassical size and scale with Italian Renaissance and Baroque decorative influences. By 1902, the Metropolitan Museum had acquired its signature Beaux-Arts facade, which defines the exterior look of the museum to this day. A few years earlier, the Boston Public Library, then the finest public library in the world, moved into magnificent new quarters, whose features included a massive reading room resembling a Roman basilica and a central courtyard modeled on a 16th century Italian Renaissance cloister. Free and open to the public, the library was celebrated by local newspapers as a palace of the people and as feeding the most careless or unconscious eye with the food of high artistic loveliness. The scale and ornateness of these structures reveal the ambitions of the urban elites who built them. These elites imagined their museums and libraries as permanent monuments to their civic vision and influence. They were, at the same time, making a deep investment in their cities, proclaiming their concern for the well-being of the urban masses. Founders of the Metropolitan expressed this sentiment in 1880, when they talked about diffusing knowledge of art in its higher forms of beauty in order to educate and refine a practical and laborious people. The energy that they poured into these institutions, however, also revealed anxieties about their own social status. For the newly wealthy in their ranks, museums, symphonies, operas, and the like offered a form of alchemy that converted their riches into cultural prestige and authority. As one museum leader said, these institutions would convert pork into porcelain, grain and produce into priceless pottery, the root ores of commerce into sculptured marble, and railroad shares and mining stocks into the glorified canvas of the world's masters. Elites worried, too, about plebeian resistance to their civilizing projects.
But they see poor people.
What if the masses ignore these institutions or misuse them?
Oh, so you want to
conflict in the late 19th century between administrators and the people. The former laid down set rules about rest and enforcement of those institutions.
You're about to frickin' die.
Left alone, demanding a role in shaping park and museum rules to
So I
their
have
own
Pet T-Rex.
preferences.
That's a cool
In the
T-Rex.
1880s, 100 labor organizations representing 50,000 workers presented petitions to the Metropolitan and Natural History Museums asking that these institutions open their doors to the public on Sunday, the only day that was free of work for most of New York City's inhabitants. Religious groups and pious individuals on the boards of trustees brought intense pressure on these museums to keep their doors closed on the Sabbath.
Oh
By
my god.
1892, however, both institutions decided to open on Sundays, handing a victory to the city's labor movement.
Yay.
Privately, at least, the more visionary museum.
I hate how everything's closed on
the
Sundays.
demand among
It's so
the city's
stupid.
poor for access had become so strong. The conflicts of urban life were acutely felt in Chicago. As the fastest growing American city, it was also one of the hardest to control. Rapid growth spurred innovation,
And
but
crime.
also generated a gulf between the rich and the poor. Violent labor-capital conflict, see Chapter 19,
More
and
people equals more
widespread
crime.
corruption. The city also suffered from disasters such as the typhoid epidemic of 1882 and the Chicago fire of 1871, which destroyed the homes of 100,000 residents across a 4-mile stretch of land. The massive destruction caused by the fire actually accelerated urban creativity and innovation. A pioneering group of American architects, the so-called Chicago School, coalesced in the city a decade after the fire. It included men such as Louis Sullivan and John Wellborn Root and a young draftsman by the name of Frank Lloyd Wright. America's most daring skyscraper designs emerged from their ranks, as did buildings, mostly Sullivan's creations, that merged crisp modern lines, functionality, and wondrous ornamentation. At a later time, Wright would take what he learned as Root's and Sullivan's assistant and develop a distinctive American form of modernist architecture that made his buildings in Chicago and elsewhere among the most original and admired in 20th century America. Chicago's rapid ascent as a center for manufacturing, trade, and architectural innovation made it the choice for hosting the Columbia Exposition of 1893, a world's fair to celebrate the 400th anniversary of Columbus's discovery of America. The fair, 2 square miles, the Eiffel Tower as an architectural marvel wrought of iron and steel. At the heart of this enterprise was a monumental set of gleaming buildings called the White City.
The White
City.
DC.
Monument created for the Columbia Exposition of 1893 in Chicago.
Oh.
Preg 3/5 on this page next. Meant to evoke the classical grandeur of Greece and Rome and to trumpet the maturation of American civilization. One set of buildings, agriculture, transportation, manufacturing, among them, devoted itself to inventorying America's achievements in various economic sectors. Other buildings celebrated American women, the histories, cultures, and peoples of the individual states, and the contributions of foreign nations to the story of human progress. The transportation building, designed by Sullivan, was the most innovative of the fair's structures, while the manufacturer's building was the largest, covering more than twice as much area as the Great Pyramid of Egypt and requiring 120,000 incandescent lamps to
Oh
keep it
my
lit.
god.
Steel skeletons held the buildings up. They were sheathed in perishable stucco, unlikely to survive even one Chicago winter. The stucco was easy to work with, however, and thus allowed architects to unleash their decorative instincts in their building designs. 20.2 The White City. Details. A photograph of many intricate classical arch buildings constructed
no
around
kidding, it's all white. The most
intersection of
boring
two
color.
rivers. People walk along the bridges and sides of the waterways. Flags line the building roofs. Sculptures line the water. Why build such an extravagant and temporary city that would leave no enduring mark on Chicago? Johnston, Francis Benjamin Library of Congress Prints and Photographs Division, LCU 62-104795. This photograph captures the scale, grandeur, and classical lines of the Columbia Exposition's White City. The individual buildings were carefully laid out around a man-made lagoon created by landscape master Olmsted himself, who imparted a neoclassical unity to the entire enterprise. Broad, open courts studded with statuary and interspersed with fountains and parks connected the buildings to each other. It is remarkable that exposition planners invested so much effort in a city meant to exist only for a few months. The planners nevertheless hoped that their work would endure in terms of influencing urban design, if not as an actual urban space. Indeed, the White City, an exemplar of Beaux-Arts principles, gave rise to a movement of urban architectural renovation that would become known as the City Beautiful Movement. City Beautiful Movement. A movement of urban architectural renovation. Rev 4/5 on this page next. Its carefully composed vision of urban order, its American leaders hoped, would inspire city planners across the United States to impose a similar kind of order on the urban environments in which they lived. Metaphorically, the rise of this white city out of the swamps of Jackson Park south of Chicago symbolized the city's and the nation's capacity for rebirth. A utopian dream of an ordered city and a triumphant industrial civilization. The White City embodied America's quest for and belief in perfection. 20.3 Union Station, Washington, D.C. Details. An illustration of a large classical building with an open yard and wide paths on its front. People walk or drive their cars freely around it. Cue what civic ideals was City Beautiful architecture meant to express. The Union Station seems to be a successful embodiment of these ideals. Union Station, Washington, D.C. 1928, Color 2, American School, 20th Century / Private Collection Peter Newark American Pictures The Bridgman Art Library. The capital city's train station, which opened in 1908 and is still being used today, is an exemplary
1908,
of
still being used.
architecture.
Wow.
Its lines and landscaping reveal how much it was influenced by Chicago's White City. Indeed, the two projects shared an architect, Daniel Burnham. This color lithograph dates from 1928. With paid admissions exceeding 21 million people in a nation with a population of 63 million, the Columbia Exposition was by far the most successful fair in American history. Americans from everywhere came to marvel at this reincarnation of ancient Rome and to record their impressions in special printed books that thoughtfully guided them through the fair, beginning with the page, My First Day in the White City. The White City did fill many fairgoers with pride and inspiration, much as the planners of the fair hoped it would. Visitors, however, also found their attention drawn to another part of the fair, one that focused on amusement rather than education, and on the distances of modern life rather than its symmetry. The Midway Plaisance. Midway Plaisance, a section of the Columbia Exposition of 1893 that included concessions, games, the Ferris wheel, traveling museums, and freak shows. Prep 5/5 on this page was a long strip located at some distance from the White City, full of concessions where one could buy food and drink, engage in games, line up for rides including the Ferris wheel, and gaze upon the curiosities that countless small entrepreneurs had gathered into their traveling dime museums and freak shows.
That looks cool.
This, Daniel Burton, the fair's head designer, understood, was the lighter and more fantastic side of the fair.
Yeah, look at this.
The chaotic variety of its sights and smells proved irresistible to tourists. 20.4 Midway Plaisance. Details. An illustration shows the scene of a carnival. A crowd of people walk along the road beside a Ferris wheel and shop fronts. What elements of the world's national, religious, and racial diversity were on display in this artistic rendering of Midway? Might the diversity of Midway be construed as an endorsement of the diversity of America's urban centers? Why or why not? Stop montage archive photos getting images. Columbian Exposition fairgoers were drawn to this lively entertainment strip. They rode the giant Ferris wheel, poked their heads in shops, mounted camels, and explored the exotic cultures on display in Asian and African pavilions. Part of Midway's variety was deliberately ethnographic, as numerous pavilions displayed life in areas of Africa and Asia. The accent was on the primitive and exotic. The pavilions did not emphasize the modernizing elites of these faraway places, or their achievements in manufacture or transportation, but rather native people
so basically some of a racist thing.
It was hard to miss the implication that civilization occurred in America and Europe, as represented in the White City, while primitive belonged to people of color from Africa.
Oh yeah, didn't something happen with this guy that he put people on display
and reinforced a racial hierarchy
in France?
That the superiority of white, middle-class civilization. African Americans understood how much this hierarchy organized not only America's relationship with much of the world, but also life within the United States itself. The anti-lynching crusader Ida B. Wells, see Chapter 18, published a pamphlet with contributions from several black leaders, titled The Reason Why the Colored American is Not in the World's Columbian Exposition, exploring the intertwined histories of American slavery and racism.
He's brave to do that.
Detailed accounting of the refusal of
That's how you get shamed back
to
then,
include
yeah.
African Americans in their plans.
I respect that, how she's brave.
To all Americans, the exposition practically is, literally and figuratively, a white city, the pamphlet asserted. Wells boycotted the fair on Colored American Day, but former abolitionist Frederick Douglass attended in order to give a stirring speech. Men talk of the Negro problem, he said. There is no Negro problem. The problem is whether the American people have honesty enough, loyalty enough, honor enough, patriotism enough to live up to their own constitution. Try as it might, the Columbia Exposition could not erase the question of race. Nor could all the striving for unity and placidity in the White City erase the presence in Chicago and other major American cities of polyglot populations of diverse ethnic origins. These international populations would stake a claim to define the urban areas in which they lived as much as the elites who built the palatial museums, opera houses, and white cities.
$20.2 Immigration.
20-2 Immigration. Q. From which parts of the world did immigrants come in the years between 1880 and...
A lot of them are Chinese.
What caused them to migrate? What were their patterns of work
Chinese
and residence in the United
emigrated
States?
from China because of how much the opium
prices
prices from that long.
but never had so many come in so short a time. Between 1880 and 1920, some 23 million immigrants came to a country that numbered only 76 million in 1900. From 1900 to 1914, an average of 1 million immigrants arrived each year. In many cities of the Northeast and Midwest, immigrants and their children constituted a majority of the population. In 1920s Boston, New York City, Chicago, and Milwaukee, immigrants accounted for more than 70% of the total population. In Buffalo, Detroit, and Minneapolis,
60%.
more than 60%. And in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Seattle, more than 50%.
That's a lot of people.
Everywhere in the country.
Those people probably ended up, you know, mixing cultures, and that's how we have such a diverse amount of people today.
And their children as a percentage of the population of selected cities. 1920. Details. A bar chart plots percentage of immigrants of total population for various cities. Percentages by city are as follows. New York, 77. Chicago, 74. Philadelphia, 55. Detroit, 65. Cleveland, 70. Boston, 75. Baltimore, 35. Pittsburgh, 55.
That's a lot of immigrants.
45.
I didn't know there were that many.
67. San Francisco.
That probably
63.
points to why this country has such
Milwaukee,
a really
72.
rich, diverse mixing
Washington,
pot
D.C.,
of cultures.
24. Newark, 73.
New York
Orleans,
is a
29.
New York.
Minneapolis, 64. Kansas City, 29. Seattle, 52. Source, data from U.S. Department of Commerce, Bureau of the Census, 14th Census of the United States, 1920. Population, Washington, D.C. European immigration accounted for approximately 3/4 of the total. Some states received significant numbers of non-European immigrants, Chinese, Japanese, and Filipinos in California, Mexicans in California and the Southwest, and French Canadians in New England. Although their presence profoundly affected regional economies, politics, and culture, their numbers, relative to the number of European immigrants, were small. Immigrants from Latin America were free to enter the United States throughout this period, but few did until 1910, when the social disorder caused by the Mexican Revolution propelled a stream of refugees to southwestern parts of the United States. 500,000 French Canadians had migrated to New England and the upper Midwest between 1867 and 1901. After that, the rate slowed as the pace of industrialization in Quebec quickened.
I never knew that's how many people immigrate. I mean, that's literally what the United States is known for, just being a mixing pot of cultures and ideas, which is pretty cool. A concept to behold.
20-2A. European immigration. Most of the European immigrants who arrived between 1880 and 1914 came from Eastern and Southern Europe. Among them were 3 to 4 million Italians, 2 million Russian and Polish Jews, 2 million Hungarians, and an estimated 5 million Slavs and other peoples from Eastern and Southeastern Europe, Poles, Bohemians, Slovaks, Russians, Ukrainians, Lithuanians, Serbians, Croatians, Slovenes,
We should create a country before the rise of the Soviet Union.
Macedonians, and Greeks. Hundreds of thousands came as well from Turkey, Armenia, Lebanon, Syria, and other Near Eastern lands abutting the European continent. See Figure 20.2. Figure 20.2 Sources of immigration. Details. Two pie charts compare sources of immigration in percentages from 1860 to 1900, 1900 to 1920. 1860 to 1900. German 28, British 18, Irish 15, Scandinavian 11, other Central European 10, Italian 8, Eastern European
It's like the easiest way to get crystal right here.
Western European 4, 1900 to 1920. Italian 22, Austro-Hungarian 22, Russian and Baltic states 18, other Northwestern European 18, Canadian 6, Asian 4, German 4, all others 6. These post-1880 arrivals were called new immigrants to underscore the cultural gap separating them from the old immigrants, who had come from Northwestern Europe, Great Britain, Scandinavia, and Germany. Old immigrants were regarded by many native-born Americans as racially fit, culturally sophisticated, and politically mature. The new immigrants, by contrast, were often regarded as racially inferior,
Oh,
culturally
boy.
impoverished, and incapable
It's kind of
assimilating
hypocritical
American
how
values and traditions.
they were advertised almost basically like they're on the basis of land of the free, but they literally would like literally like really be racist and stuff like that. Hey, oh, America, America 1900, America, land of the free. If you're a white dude, if you're not that, maybe we'll do that in a few decades. Yeah, still free. Man, that's kind of just sad to think about how long it took other people to get their freedom.
Unaccustomed to urban industrial life, but they were not as different from the old immigrants as the label implied. For example, many of the earlier arriving Catholic peasants from Ireland and Germany had
Ireland, a lot of people came here because of the potato famine.
Later. Most mass immigration
When they did come here, people hated the Irish, or quote, taking their work. Which I say it's fine. Have the Irish come here, because guess what? That boosts the economy with workers.
Depended on having a contact, a family member, relative, or fellow villager already established in an American city. These people provided immigrants with a destination, inspiration. They were examples of success in America, advice about jobs, and financial aid. Sometimes whole villages in southern Italy or western Russia, or at least all of the young men there, seem to disappear, only to reappear in a certain section. Without contacts in the United States were relatively unaffected by the emigration mania. Most immigrants viewed their trip to the United States as a temporary sojourn.
And then they'd go back and take the riches to their families. That's how it
in
works.
search of high wages that would enable them to improve their economic standing in their homeland. For them, America was a land of economic opportunity, not a land to call home. This attitude explains why men vastly outnumbered women and children in the migration stream. From 1899 to 1910, 3/4 of the immigrants from southern and eastern Europe were adult men. Some had left wives and children behind. More were single. Most wanted merely to make enough money to buy a farm in their native land. True to their dream, many did return home. For every 100 Italian immigrants who arrived in the United States between 1907 and 1911, for example, 73 returned to Italy. Before the First World War, an estimated 60 to 80% of all Slavic immigrants eventually returned to the land of their birth.
Wow.
Most immigrants looked forward to returning to Europe. Not until the First World War shut down transatlantic travel did most immigrants begin to regard their presence in the United States as permanent.
Huh. World War One basically kept a lot of these immigrants within their within within the U.S. Chinese and Japanese. A lot of the immigration was Asian. So I learned in the last chapter.
Immigration. The relatively small numbers of Chinese and Japanese immigrants came to the United States in the late 19th and early 20th century reflected the efforts of native Americans and their allies to keep them out. As many as 300,000 Chinese immigrants arrived in the United States between 1861 and 1882. And more than 200,000 Japanese immigrants journeyed to Hawaii and the western continental United States between 1891 and 1907. They contributed in major ways to the development of two of the West's major industries, railroad building and commercial agriculture. These two immigrant groups might have formed two of America's largest, each numbering in the millions, but the U.S. government began to exclude Chinese immigrant laborers in 1882. Via the Chinese Exclusion Act and Japanese immigrant laborers in 1907, see Chapter 22. The government also interpreted a 1790 law to mean that Chinese, Japanese, and other East Asian immigrants were ineligible for citizenship. These exclusions remained in force until the 1940s and 1950s. They expressed the racial prejudice felt by most native-born white Americans toward non-white Asian immigrants, and they also revealed how determined America was to remain a nation of European immigrants and
How does he not die?
The early streams of Chinese and Japanese migration to the United States were overwhelmingly composed of men looking for work. Similar to the European immigrants, the Chinese and Japanese sojourners tended to follow precise migratory paths from one region or village in China or Japan to one city or region in the United States. Conditions in China were more desperate than those in Japan, where industrialization had begun to generate new wealth and absorb some of the rural population. Chinese immigrants, as a result, often suffered greater hardship than did their Japanese counterparts. In the 19th century, many were forced to sign contracts with suppliers of overseas laborers that subjected them to slave-like conditions. They were loaded onto boats for the trans-Pacific voyage, bound to particular employers for years on end, thrust into dangerous working conditions, and paid paltry wages.
Dude.
20.5 immigrant Japanese children arrived at Angel Island, San Francisco Harbor,
Angel
1905.
Island, dude.
Details. 3 Japanese children stand on a ship deck, 2 wearing traditional Japanese clothing. All wear Western hats. 1 wears sandals, 1 wears a Western coat. Q. What were the effects of exclusion on the Japanese and Chinese populations already in the United States at this time? Bedman/Corpese. Beginning in 1907, as a result of the gentleman's agreement between the United States and the Japanese governments, it would no longer be possible for most Japanese immigrants to come to the United States. Had they tried to enter the United States after 1907, these children might well have been turned away. Significant numbers of Chinese and Japanese immigrants continued to try to enter the United States during the period of Asian immigrant exclusion after 1882 in the case of the Chinese and after 1907 in the case of the Japanese. Some were desperate to reunite with family members already living in the United States, while others were driven to escape deteriorating economic circumstances in their homeland. Many attempted to enter the United States with forged papers declaring them to be merchants, a permitted class of Chinese and Japanese immigrants, when they were not or stating that they had been resident in the United States before the exclusion laws came into effect and were thus entitled to return. San Francisco was their principal port of entry, and Angel Island, in San Francisco Harbor, became the counterpart of Ellis Island in New York Harbor, the place where inspectors from the U.S. Bureau of Immigration interrogated them and scrutinized their documents and often sent them back to Asia. Other East Asian immigrants attempted to come into the United States through Canada or Mexico, hoping to find a non-patrolled part of the land border and to cross into the United States undetected. They became, in effect, America's first illegal aliens. That a certain percentage of East Asian immigrants had entered the country illegally and were subject to deportation generated considerable fear among the Asian immigrant populations resident in the United States, deepening tendencies within these communities to secrecy and to separation from mainstream American society. Despite these considerable hardships, Asian immigrants would prove to be resourceful and find ways to build homes and livelihoods in America.
I like how I just watched my T-Rex destroy a freaking raptor.
20-2C. Immigrant labor. In the first decade of the 20th century, immigrant men and their male children constituted 70% of the workforce in 15 of the 19 leading U.S. industries. They concentrated in industries where work was the most backbreaking. Immigrants built the nation's railroads and tunnels, mined its coal, iron ore, and other minerals, stoked its hot and sometimes deadly steel furnaces, and slaughtered and packed its meat in Chicago's putrid packing houses. In 1909, first and second generation immigrants, especially Greeks, Italians, Japanese, and Mexicans, constituted more than 90% of the labor force that built and maintained the nation's railroads. Of the 750,000 Slovaks who arrived in America before 1913, at least 600,000 headed for the coal mines and steel mills of western Pennsylvania. The steel mills of Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Cleveland, and Chicago also attracted disproportionately large numbers of Poles and other Slavs. Immigrants also performed lighter but no less arduous work. Jews and Italians predominated in the garment manufacturing shops of New York City, Chicago, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Boston. In 1900, French-Canadian immigrants and their children held one of every 2 jobs in New England's cotton textile industry. By 1920, the prosperity of California's rapidly growing agricultural industry depended primarily on Mexican and Filipino labor. In these industries, immigrant women and children, who worked for lower wages than men, formed a large part of the labor force.
That's stupid how they get paid less
States
than men.
restricted child labor.
They did the same
More than
work, the
25%
same
of
hours, the
boys
same
and
condition,
10% of girls aged
the same
10
pay.
to 15 were gainfully employed.
and best of all under the
Those
same
who
belt.
worked
So
in heavy industry, mining, or railroading were especially
oh
vulnerable
crap!
to
That
accidents and injury.
Rex just got
In
wrecked.
1901, for instance, 1 in every 400 railroad workers died on the job and 1 in every 26 suffered injury. Between the year 1906 and 1911, almost 1/4 of the recent immigrants employed at the U.S. Steel Corporation's South Works, Pittsburgh, were injured or killed on the job. Lax attention to safety rendered even light industry hazardous and sometimes fatal. In 1911, a fire broke out on an upper floor of the Triangle Shirtwaist Company. Triangle Shirtwaist Company, New York City site of a tragic 1911 industrial fire that killed 146 workers who were unable to find their way to safety. 1/1 on this page. A New York City garment factory. The building had no fire escape. The owners of the factory, moreover, had locked the entrances to each floor as a way of keeping their employees at work. A
Wow.
total of 146 workers,
Just like the candle
mostly young
factory
Jewish
did.
and Italian women, perished in the fire or from desperate 9-story leaps to the pavement below. 20.6 Triangle Shirtwaist Company fire. Details. A painting of a fire on the 5th floor of a multi-story building, with horse-drawn fire carts and a crowd gathered outside. Some firemen climbed ladders to spray water on the fire. Some carried bodies covered in sheets. Policemen addressed the crowd. Museum of the City of New York, Corbees. In 1911, a fire at the Triangle Shirtwaist Company in New York City claimed the lives of 146 workers, most of them young Jewish and Italian women.
Where is my
Many
Rex?
died because they could not escape the flames. The building had no fire escapes, and the employer had locked the entrances to each floor to keep
That
workers on the job.
had to
The
start
tragedy spurred
controversy.
the growth of unions and the movement for factory reform in New York. Chronic fatigue and inadequate nourishment increased the risk of accident and injury. Work weeks averaged 60 hours, 10 hours every day except Sunday. Workers who were
10
granted
hours
Saturday
every- I
afternoons
couldn't.
off, thus reducing their work week to 55 hours, considered themselves fortunate. Steel workers were not so lucky. They labored from 72
Steel was
to
probably
89
worse.
hours per week and were required to work one 24-hour shift every 2 weeks.
Oh my god.
Workers had to labor long hours simply to eat
That
out to
is-
meet their living. In 1900,
It's not, I hope
the
that's
annual
illegal.
earnings of American manufacturing workers averaged only $400.
I couldn't play video games for 24 hours straight.
Skilled jobs offered immigrants far more, as much as $1,500 to $2,000 per year, but most of these jobs were held by Yankees and by Germans, Irish, Welsh, and other old immigrant Europeans. Through their unions, workers of Northern European extraction also controlled access to new jobs that opened up and usually managed to fill them with a son, relative, or fellow countryman. Consequently, relatively few of the new immigrants rose to the prosperous ranks of skilled labor. In any case, employers were replacing many skilled workers with machines operated by cheaply paid operatives. Most working families required 2 or 3 wage earners to survive. If a mother could not go out to work because she had small children at home, she might rent rooms to some of the many single men who had recently immigrated. But economic security was difficult to attain. In his 1904 book, Poverty, social investigator Robert Hunter conservatively estimated that 20% of the industrial population of the North lived in poverty.
20%? Damn. It's way higher than today. Living conditions, that shouldn't be any better.
20-2D. Living conditions. Strained economic circumstances confined many working-class families to cramped and dilapidated living quarters. Many of them lived in 2- or 3-room apartments, with several people sleeping in each room. To make ends meet, one immigrant New York City family of 8 living in a 2-room apartment took in 6 boarders. Some boarders considered themselves lucky to have their own bed. The luxury was denied the 14 Slovaks who shared 8 beds in a small Pittsburgh apartment and the New York City printer who slept on a door he unhinged every night and balanced across 2 chairs.
Oh my
The lack
god.
of windows in city tenements allowed little light or air into these apartments. Crowding was endemic. The population density of New York City's Lower East Side, where most of the city's Jewish immigrants settled, reached 700 per acre in 1900, a density matching or exceeding that of the world's poorest cities. Overcrowding and poor sanitation resulted in high rates of infectious diseases, especially diphtheria, typhoid fever, and pneumonia. In the early years of the 20th century, improvements in the quality of housing and public health finally began to ease the dangers of urban life.
Yeah.
20-3. Building ethnic communities. Q. In what ways did immigrants seek economic success and social mobility? How successful were they in their efforts? The immigrants may have been poor, but they were not helpless. Migration had required a good deal of resourcefulness, self-help, and mutual aid, assets that survived in the new surroundings of American cities.
Land.
A network of institutions. Each ethnic group quickly established a network of institutions that supplied a sense of community and multiplied sources of communal assistance. Some immigrants simply reproduced those institutions that had been important to them in the old country. The devout established churches and synagogues. Lithuanian, Jewish, and Italian radicals re-established old world socialist and anarchist organizations.
Oh boy.
Irish nationalists set up clandestine chapters of the Clan Nard Gael to keep alive the struggle to free Ireland from the English. Germans felt at home in their clanvereins, athletic clubs, and musical societies. Immigrants developed new institutions as well. In the larger cities, foreign language newspapers disseminated news, advice, and culture. Each ethnic group created fraternal societies to bring together immigrants who had known each other in the old country, or shared the same trade, or who had come from the same town or region. Most of these societies provided members with a death benefit, ranging from a few hundred until $1,000, that guaranteed the deceased a decent burial and the family a bit of cash. Some fraternal societies made small loans as well. Among those ethnic groups that prized homeownership, especially
Oh my god!
the fraternal societies also provided mortgage money. And
Damn it! Oh my god, this stupid... Get out of my way! Kill him. Murder him. Thank you. Oh my god. Did I just watch that man's butthole just implode on itself? Stop moving! Why are you flying? Oh my god, you're so stupid. I never told you to fly, dummy.
Play cards, or simply relax with fellow countrymen. The joy, solace, and solidarity.
Jesus, Harold Christ.
Helped countless immigrants adjust to American life.
Land, dummy! I never told you to freaking fly! Oh god, and he's moving too. You're causing oh, Mom, I'm so... Stop moving! Land! Land. Not that hard to do. Land and sit down. Stop moving.
The emergence of an ethnic middle class. Within each ethnic group, tribal minorities directed their talents and ambitions toward economic gain. Some of these entrepreneurs addressed the community of basic goods and services. Immigrants preferred to buy from fellow countrymen with whom they share a language, a history, and presumably a bond of trust. Enterprising individuals responded by opening dry goods stores.
Why is it walking?
And saloons in their ethnic neighborhoods. Those who could not afford to rent a store for their fruit, clothing, or dry goods from portable stands, wagons, or sacks carried on their backs. The work was endless and the competition tough. Men often enlisted the entire family, wife, older children, younger children, in their undertakings. Few family members were ever paid for their labor, no matter how long or hard they worked. Although many of these small businesses failed, enough survived to give some immigrants and their children foothold in the middle class.
Stop moving. Jesus Christ, is that hard to comprehend?
Truck farming and construction. A clothing manufacturer needed only a few sewing machines to become competitive. Many Jewish immigrants, having been taken in Russia and Poland, opened such facilities. If a rented space moved beyond their means, they set up shop in their own apartments. Competition among these small manufacturers was fierce.
Oh my god, stop!
And sweatshops.
Why is it moving? I literally don't have it.
And ventilation. 12-hour workdays and 70-hour work weeks during peak seasons, with every hour spent bent over a sewing machine. And poor pay and no employment security, especially for the women and children who made up a large part of this labor force. Even at this level of exploitation, many small manufacturers failed. But over time, significant numbers of them managed to firm up their position as manufacturers and to evolve into stable, responsible employers. Their success contributed to the emergence of a Jewish middle class. The story was much the same in urban construction, where Italians who had established themselves as labor contractors or padroni went into business for themselves to take advantage of the rapid expansion of American cities. Although
there you go, just toss me out and make me lose half my goddamn health. Alright, for comparison I have 260 health. That's how much I lose.
California, Japanese immigrants chose chose agriculture as their route to the middle class. Working as agricultural laborers in the 1890s, they began to acquire their own land in the early years of the 20th century. Their specialization in fresh vegetables and fruits, particularly strawberries, combined with their family labor-intensive agricultural methods, yielded $57 million in annual revenue by 1919.
Just freaking die. Nerd.
Japanese fruit and vegetable wholesalers in Los Angeles have chosen a merchant tunnel to make dark signals. The success of Japanese farmers was all the more impressive given that the state of California had passed the Alien Time Law in 1913, prohibiting Japanese and other Asian aliens from owning property in the state. Japanese immigrant farmers thus depended on their native-born children or friendly wives to acquire land for them, arrangements that made them more vulnerable to losing the land or control of it than if they had been able to own it outright themselves. Each ethnic group created its own history of economic success and social mobility. From the emerging middle classes came leaders who would provide their ethnic groups with identity, legitimacy, and power, and would lead the way toward America, and academic success served as a ticket to upward social mobility in a society that increasingly depended on university-trained engineers, managers, lawyers, doctors, and other professionals. Interpreting the visual past the photography of Jacob Reilly and Louis Hine. Jacob Reilly and Louis Hine were pioneering documentary photographers of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Both men were fiercely committed to recording the lives and daily struggles of the urban poor and to bringing those lives and struggles to the attention of a broad middle-class public. Both men hoped that their work would generate political discussions and then political pressure to improve working and living conditions.
Land.
For many Americans, Reed and Hine
Launch me off of the entire damn platform.
The two photographer styles were very different. Consider the two photographs reprinted on this page. The Reilly photograph, The Poverty and Boom of New York Streets, drawn from Reilly's 1890 book, How the Other Half Lives, depicts three runaway boys who have no family and no home. They are living by their wits in the streets and grabbing for their resting place in whatever corner of urban space they can claim. We do not get a good glimpse of the boys' faces, or of their individuality or humanity. They are a faceless heap, anonymous victims of a harsh urban environment. 20.7 and Jacob Reilly, The Poverty and Boom of New York Streets, 1890. Details. A photograph of an alleyway with paint fading from a wall. Shoeless children in torn clothing huddled together to sleep in the corner. Jacob August Reilly, Bedman, Corbiz. Louis Hine's photograph, looking for lost baggage and asylum, is startlingly different. The photograph has a foreboding quality. The luggage of this immigrant family is already lost. Fearless is the face of every family member. Will they make their way in the strange new world called America? Or is the sense of disorientation at Ellis Island the first step towards social disintegration, to be followed by unemployment and poverty, and perhaps the young boy ended up as one of Reilly's anonymous runaways? And yet there is something else in this photograph, dignity and resolve in the eyes of family members, a sense that they are not just victims but agents of their own lives. And there is unity too. Vital luggage may be gone, but the family and its spirit is intact. 20.7 Louis Hine, looking for lost baggage, Ellis Island, 1905. Details. A photograph of a woman with hair wrapped in a kerchief, holding a baby with two other children beside her. Nearby, trunks and luggage are wrapped in twine and stacked high. AKG Images news on. Do you read the photographs in a way similar to the interpretation offered in the text above? Or do you interpret their meaning differently? Q. Do you think that photography is a reliable technique for documenting the human condition? Or does the photographer have too much opportunity to shape objective reality to a preconceived story that he or she is trying to tell?
Organized crime. Ooh, gangsters.
20-3C, political machines and organized crime. The underside of this success story was the rise of government corruption and organized crime.
Yeah,
Many
that's already peaking now.
operated on the margins of economic failure and bankruptcy, and some accepted the help of those who promised financial assistance. Sometimes the help came from honest unions and upright government officials, but other times it did not. Unions were generally weak, and some government officials, lacking experience and economic security, were susceptible to bribery. Economic necessity became a breeding ground for government corruption and greed. A contractor who was eager to win a city contract to build a trolley system, a sewer line, or a new city hall, for example, would find it necessary to pay off government officials who could throw the contract his way. By 1900, such payments, referred to as graft, have become essential to the day-to-day operation of government in most large cities. Graft, in turn, made local office holding a source of economic gain. Politicians began building political organizations called machines to guarantee their success in municipal elections. The machine bosses used a variety of legal and illegal means to bring victory on election day. They won the loyalty of urban voters, especially immigrants, by providing poor neighborhoods with paved roads and sewer systems. They helped newly arrived immigrants find jobs, often on city payrolls, and occasionally provided food, fuel, or clothing to families in need. Many of their clients were grateful for these services in an age when government provided little public assistance. The bosses who ran the political machines. Political machines. Organizations that controlled local political parties and municipal governments through bribery, election fraud, and support of urban vice while providing some municipal services to the urban poor. One half on this page next, including King Richard Croker.
Thanks for throwing me off.
Michael Curley in Boston, Tom Pendergast in Kansas City, Martin Bierman in New Orleans, and Abe Roof in San Francisco served their own needs first. They saw to it that construction contracts went to those who offered the most graft, not to those who were likely to do the best job. They protected gampers, pimps, and other purveyors of urban vice who contributed large amounts to their machine coffers. They often required city employees to contribute to their campaign chests, solicit political contributions, and get out the vote on election day. And they engaged in widespread election fraud by rounding up truckloads of newly arrived immigrants and paying them to vote a certain way.
That sounds familiar.
Having their supporters vote 2 or 3 times.
Oh my god.
Stuffing ballot boxes with the votes of phantom citizens who had died, moved away, or never been born. 20.8 keeping Tammany's boots shined. Details. A comic shows a boot crushing a city hall building. A man crouches to shine the shoe. The shoe has the word Tammany on it. Cue what view of New York City's government is Kepler conveying in this cartoon. Copyright Venmo 14. This 1880s cartoon by Joseph Kepler declares that the real boss of New York City was not its elected mayor, Hugh Graham, here depicted as a shoe shiner for the city's political machine, known as Tammany Hall. The loose strap underneath the boot, used to control both City Hall and Tammany, belongs to Richard Croker, Tammany's leader from 1886 to 1901. Big city machines, then, were both positive and negative forces in urban life. Reformers despised them for disregarding vice, but many immigrants valued them for providing social well figures, too, influenced urban life. In the early years of the 20th century, gangsterism was a scourge of Italian neighborhoods where Sicilian immigrants had established outposts of the notorious mafia. Irish, Jewish, Chinese, and other ethnic communities suffered from organized crime as well. Favorite targets of these gangsters were small-scale manufacturers and contractors who were threatened with violence and economic ruin if they did not pay a gang for protection. Gangsters imposed their demands with physical force, beating up or killing those who failed to abide by the rules. In Chinese communities, secret societies originating in China, or Tongs, and initially set up in America to strengthen communal life among the immigrants, occasionally crossed the line into crime. Sometimes this transition resulted from good intentions, For example, Tong members might smuggle into the United States the wife and children of an immigrant Chinese man who had no legal way of reuniting his family, but other times, Tongs became enmeshed in far more damaging criminal activities, such as the opium trade, prostitution, and gambling. Eager for money, power, and fame, many immigrant and ethnic criminals considered themselves authentic entrepreneurs cut from the American mold. By the 1920s, petty extortion had escalated in urban areas, and underworld crime had become big business. Al Capone.
Al Capone.
Chicago monster who made a fortune from gambling, prostitution, and bootleg liquor during Prohibition.
He was put in the Alcatraz.
On his page. Chicago monster who made a fortune from gambling, prostitution, and bootleg liquor during Prohibition. Once whipped, Prohibition is the business. All I do is to supply a public demand. I do this in effect.
You're not going to hurt up, no you don't.
New York City's Arnold Rothstein. His financial sophistication won him a gambling empire and the power to fix the 1919...
Oh my god, computer, stop blacking out.
and Capone were charismatic figures, both in their ethnic communities and in the nation at large. Few immigrants, however, followed their criminal path to economic success.
I lost almost 100 health from that fall. Really.
African-American labor and community. Q.
Everybody.
Between African-American and immigrant experiences in the early 20th century. Unlike immigrants, African-Americans remained the predominantly rural and southern people in the early 20th century. See map 20. Most blacks were sharecroppers and tenant farmers. Markets for crops and other covered crops had stabilized in the early 20th century, but black farmers remained vulnerable to exploitation. Sharecroppers were accept artificially low prices for their crops.
That's
At the
sucky.
same time, they charged high prices.
Wow, that is just rigged.
Rural areas generated enough business.
Really?
More than one store altogether competitive prices might force prices down. Sharecroppers traveled elsewhere to sell their crops or purchase their necessities risk retaliation, either physical assaults by white vigilantes or evictions from their land. Thus, most remained beholden to their landowners, mired in poverty and debt. Map 20.1 African American population, 1910. Details. A map of the continental U.S. titled African American population 1910. African American population by region is summarized as follows. Greater than 4 South Atlantic region, Maryland, Delaware, West Virginia,
West
North Carolina,
Virginia.
South Carolina,
Sorry.
Florida. 500,000 to 4 million. East, South Central, Kentucky, Tennessee,
Oh, no.
Mississippi,
Yeah, good boy.
South Central, Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Texas. 100,000 to 500,000. Middle Atlantic, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. East North Central, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan,
Ohio.
Illinois, Wisconsin. West North Central, Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota. Less than 100,000. New England, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island. Mountain, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, Pacific, Florida, California. All the regions have a higher urban population than rural population, except West.
And if I had like one more of these, it'd be so. I could like get a ton of cargo transported. Just the weight. I want to bring one for weight vacation if it's possible.
Were African Americans predominantly rural? In which regions were they predominantly urban?
At least he's faster than
How do
me.
you think these regional and rural-urban distribution changed across the 20th century? This 1910 map reveals where Africans lived in 1910 and the proportion between urban and rural areas in each of the 9 designated regions. Some African Americans sought a better life by migrating to industrial areas of the south and the north. In the south, they worked in iron and coal mines.
So look back every once in a while, see if that argue fell off, because I know
railroad
it
track
could.
layers and longshoremen, and as labourers in the steel mills of Birmingham, Alabama. By the early 20th century, their presence was growing in the urban north as well, where they worked on the fringes of industry as janitors, elevator operators, teamsters, and servants of various kinds. In southern industries, blacks were subjected to hardships and indignities that even the newest immigrants were not expected to endure. Railroad contractors in the south, for example, treated their black track layers like prisoners. Armed guards marched them to work in the morning and back at night.
Damn, that's some straight up Russian gulag stuff.
And forced to purchase company commissary.
It reminds me of
what they earned. Their belongings were locked up to discourage them from running away. Although other southern employers of black workers did not engage in labour practices as harsh as those of the railroad contractors, they still confined blacks to the dirtiest and most grueling jobs. The Jim Crow laws passed by every southern state legislature in the 1890s legalized this rigid separation of the black and white races in Chapter 18. The nation's worsening racial climate adversely affected southern blacks who moved north, even though these migrants
Don't do it.
that generally did not have Jim Crow laws. Northern industrialists generally moved to hire black migrants for manufacturing jobs, preferring the labour of European immigrants.
Because it's cheaper, that's just stupid scummy.
Employers turned to African Americans.
There's a good river to transport stuff down.
Resided in northern urban areas also experienced intensifying discrimination in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. In 1870, about one-third of the black men in many northern cities had been skilled tradesmen, blacksmiths, painters, shoemakers, and carpenters. Serving both black and white clients, these men enjoyed steady work and good pay, but by 1910 only 10% of black men made a living in this way. In many cities, the number of barber shops and food catering businesses owned by blacks also declined, as did black representation.
I might build billboards when they done this.
Hotel waiters. These barbers, food caterers, and waiters and all the middle class whose livelihood depended on the patronage of white clients. By the early 20th century, this middle class was shrinking, the victim of growing racism. Whites were no longer willing to engage the services of blacks, preferring to have their hair cut, beards shaved, and food prepared and served by European immigrants. The residential segregation of northern blacks also rose in these years as whites excluded them from growing numbers of urban neighborhoods. African Americans did not lack the resourcefulness. In urban areas of settlement, they laced their communities with the same array of institutions, churches, fraternal insurance societies, political organizations that solidified ethnic neighborhoods. A new black middle class arose consisting of ministers, professionals, and business people who serviced the needs of their racial groups.
I don't think you can put a rope down here because of like,
Funeral homes,
see right there, it chokes that.
newspapers, groceries,
So I'd like to block
restaurants,
this area.
and bars opened for business on the commercial thoroughfares of African American neighborhoods. Many businessmen had been inspired by the words of black educator Booker T. Washington, and specifically by his argument that blacks should devote
Man, you're so
themselves to
damn
self-help and
fine.
self-efficiency. Madame C.J. Walker. Madame C.J. Walker, black entrepreneur who built a lucrative business from the hair and skin lotions she devised and sold to black customers throughout the country. 1/1 on this page. Offers one example of a black woman who built a lucrative business from the hair and skin lotions she devised and sold to black customers throughout the country.
Let's just repeat this stuff, bro.
African American real estate agents achieved significant wealth and power. 20.9 Madonna Walker. A woman in a flowing dress and pearls, hair arranged in stone rolls, posing by scalloped furniture. Every collection news song. This prominent African American entrepreneur built a successful business selling hair and skin lotions to black customers throughout the country. Nevertheless, entrepreneurial success remains more elusive among African Americans than among immigrants. Black communities were often smaller and poorer than white ethnic ones. Economic opportunities were fewer, and black businessmen found it more difficult than their white ethnic counterparts to cultivate customers outside of their core community. Racial prejudice stood as an obstacle to black business success. Meanwhile, blacks were so marginalized in politics that they had little opportunity to gain power or wealth through the holding political office or
So that's very quality.
Thus, the African American middle class remained smaller and more precarious than did its counterparts in ethnic communities, less able to lead the way toward affluence and assimilation.
Pretty sure I wrapped it down here. Yeah, I remember putting my wrap down here.
African American labor and community. Q. What were the similarities and differences between the African American and immigrant experiences in the early 20th century? Unlike immigrants, African Americans remained a predominantly rural and southern people in the early 20th century. See map 20.1. Most blacks were sharecroppers and tenant farmers. The markets for cotton and other southern crops had stabilized in the early 20th century, but black farmers remained vulnerable to exploitation. Landowners, most of them white, often forced sharecroppers to accept artificially low prices for their crops. At the same time, they charged high prices for seed,
I'm literally
tools,
repeating the same
and
page.
20-5. Working class and commercial culture. Q. What kinds of commercial entertainment took root among urban workers in the late 19th and early 20th century? How did this commercial culture compare to the cultural initiatives undertaken by urban elites? As much as the white elites and their middle class allies attempted to impose a genteel order on city life, the city's vitality escaped such bounds. Most workers shared in a new culture of commercial entertainment that included dance halls, music halls, vaudeville theatres, Nickelodeons, early storefront movie theatres, amusement parks, and ballparks. Storefront vaudeville theatres, for instance, began to advertise cheap amusements to a broad working public in the 1880s. With roots in such antebellum entertainments as minstrelsy, circuses, and dime museums, vaudeville shows offered a variety of miscellaneous short acts for only a dime. A typical show might include sentimental ballads, acrobats, soft shoe dances, magicians, violators, one-act plays, blackface minstrelsy, sports, dance, baseball, or boxing, puppeteers, jugglers, or dancing bears. Not considered respectable middle-class fare at first, vaudeville became increasingly popular and eventually became a cross-class, national phenomenon. Amusement parks such as Steeplechase Park at Coney Island, built in 1895, attracted a large working-class audience of men and women while soon also appealing to middle-class youth. Older middle-class commentators found the unchaperoned mingling of young men and women in an urban public space troubling, even shocking, but that loosening of restraint was what made Coney Island so pleasurable and exciting. A new kind of institution in American life. Coney Island was a structured world promoting gaiety and play, with dozens of rides anticipating.
If I had enough time and resources, I would build a ford right here.
Jets of air blew women's skirts up. Will she throw her arms around your neck and yell? Asked a sign for the cannon coaster, providing its own answer. Well,
if you don't know what a ford is, it's basically like this little pathway that goes in the water. It's almost like a bridge, but like it allows you to, it allowed me to walk across, but still have water flowing across.
The industrial workplace. The 1884 Switchback Railroad, for instance, an early precursor to the roller coaster, was directly inspired by the operation of gravity-powered coal cars in the shafts of coal mines. New innovations in technology and transportation found a pleasurable mirror at Coney Island and at the other amusement parks around the country that quickly sprang up in imitation. While vaudeville theatres and amusement parks at first attracted a primarily working-class crowd of pleasure seekers, they increasingly appealed to middle-class audiences as well. These cross-class populations were the ones drawn in such large numbers to the sights and sounds of the Midway of the 1893 Columbia Exposition. Their attraction to commercial entertainment on the strips subverted the work of those elites who were attempting to impose white city notions of order and demeanor on America's city dwellers. 20.10 Third Avenue and Luna Park, Coney Island, 1913. Details. An illustration of a city street by the water. On each side of the street, buildings are lit up with signs, many of which read Luna, with a crescent moon motif. Lake County Museum of Fine Art Museums Corbees, with its 1 million lights. 3rd Avenue in Brooklyn, New York, advertised itself as the most brilliant red-covered fair in the world. The avenue included the entrance to Luna Park, one of Coney Island's most popular attractions.
There it is, the microphone. So yeah, it's like hiding right there. Should right next to it. Almost done.
20-5A. Popular literature and the movies. Just as in the antebellum period, urban workers read a wide variety of dime novels, paperbacks that sold for a dime. See Chapter 10, and newspapers. Beginning in the 1860s and 1870s, a flourish.
Are you goddamn kidding me? Oh my god. That stupid damn box was destroyed? Okay, dude. Disable following. Oh my god. That box was destroyed. I'm so pissed. I need to go find it. I might know where it's destroyed because that stupid dumbass Bronco. Now, I need to find it now. Damn it, I'm out of food. Oh my god, I'm so pissed! No.
The popular 1871 story, Birth of the Sewing Machine Girl, or Death of Innocent, inspired many imitators and was staged as a popular play in New York City. Its author, Laura Jane Libby, published more than 60 novels in the 1880s appealing to a working-class audience. Working women read a variety of romances as well, purchasing dime novels from newsstands and pushcarts in large cities. Featuring wealthy heroines or working women who discovered that by birth they were actually aristocrats, these romantic tales offered fantasies that, in imagination, at least, closed the gulf between the classes. Dime novels appealing to working-class men often told heroic stories of individuals overcoming poverty and other obstacles to become the foreman or...
God, you can't stop!
Some stories allowed a form of imagined compensation for the loss of independence that men actually experienced.
Oh my god, dog. You know what, T-Rex, just stop. Get in the water and just stop. Uh-oh. You're back. I swear if I don't find that goddamn box, I'm gonna be so livid. That's like 1,200 to 1,500 metal, and it's.
Paid wage earners. If literature gestured toward the past, another form of popular entertainment, the movies, pointed toward the future. Movies were well suited to poor city dwellers with little money, little free time, and little command of English. Initially, the movies cost only a nickel. The Nickelodeons where they were shown were usually converted storefronts in working class neighborhoods. Movies required little leisure time because at first, they lasted only 15 minutes, on average. Viewers with more time on their hands could stay for a cycle of 2 or 3 films, or several cycles. And even non-English speakers could understand what was happening on the silent screen. By 1910, approximately 20,000 Nickelodeons dotted northern cities. See Table 20.1. Table 20.1 Nickelodeons in major American cities, 1910. Cities. Population. Nickelodeons. Estimate. Seating capacity. Population per seat. New York. 4,338,322. 450. 150,000. 29. Chicago. 2,310,93,000. 22.
My God, click! My stupid computer.
160. 57,000. 26. Street. Louis. 824,000. 142. 50,410. 16. Cleveland. 600,000. 75. 22,500. 27. Baltimore.
I have to find where this stupid thing is. It doesn't look like it was destroyed far from where we left. Over here, I think. Oh, great. There's a damn... Please tell me he's... There it is, there it is, there it is, I think. That's not it? Oh my god. Oh my god, I cannot. Did I put it? Oh my god, wouldn't it be cool if we had a system where I cannot... Where the hell did I put this metal at? I swear to God, I put it in the one that was in the corner. Jesus.
600,000. 83. 24,900. 24. San Francisco. 400,000. 68. 32,400. 12. Cincinnati. 350,000. 75. 22,500. 16. New Orleans. 325,000. 28. 5,600. 58. Source: Garth Jewett. Film: The Democratic Arts.
Oh my
Boston,
God.
Little, Brown, 1976, p. 46. These early moving pictures were primitive by today's standards, but they were thrilling just the same. The figures appearing on the screen were larger than life. Moviegoers could transport themselves to parts of the world they would otherwise never see, encounter people they would otherwise never meet, and watch boxing matches they could otherwise not afford to attend. The darkened theatre provided a setting in which secret desires, especially sexual ones, could be explored. As one newspaper breathlessly commented in 1899, for the first time in the history of the world, it is possible to see what a kiss looks like. No easy generalizations are possible about the content of these early films, more than half of which came from France, Germany, and Italy. American-made films tended toward slapstick comedies, adventure stories, and romances such as those generated by Buster Keaton and Fatty Arbuckle, two silent screen stars. See the History through film feature. Producers did not yet shy away, as they soon would, from the lustier or seedier sides of American life. The Hollywood formula of happy endings had yet to be worked out. In fact, the industry, centered in New York City and Fort Lee, New Jersey, had yet to locate itself in sunny Southern California. In 1914, the movie's first sex symbol, Theda Bara, debuted in a movie that showed her tempting an upstanding American ambassador into infidelity and ruin. She would be the first of the big screen's vamps, so called because the characters...
Thank God I noticed that. Now I have to go all the way back. It's better than losing everything, right?
Of men. 20.12 Theda Bara as Cleopatra, 1917. Details. A woman wears a metal headband and bracelet. She is bare-chested, save for two small wound metal circles poorly covering her breasts.
Oh my
Her skirt
God.
is long.
Yeah, I think the movie standard has definitely gotten a little bit different. Let's just say that.
Cue how did the American public react to the frank expressions of sexual allure and danger that were becoming a prominent feature of American
That
cinema.
was so weird back then.
Still from Cleopatra in another 1917 movie, Coney Island, discussed on next section, Bedman Corbees. Bara was the first movie actress to gain fame for her roles as a vamp, a woman.
So cringy. Okay, I have a question. You see that? What? Okay, is that choke right there able to be passed through by what's it called? A raft? I'm gonna take a break because I'm getting tired. I doubt it, but if this little thing right here could be passed through with a raft right here, it probably could, then it'll allow me to get into the interior. Oh, this is the area that me and my cousin are setting up base in, which I might set base in myself too. What the hell? You see on like kind of center island where it almost looks like it's surrounded by water and there's like a little mountain in it? Let's see. It's at like the island with the mountain in the bottom right corner of the box. Kind of see it. Like if you take the tiles, like the bottom left tile, you go 3 to the right and 3 up. That island. Sunlight in this game is so annoying because it literally blinds you. Like it's like getting a flash grenade 50,000 times in the face. But yeah, there's this little canal going left of this. And do you see where it kind of like forms like a little, like a mouth almost? It looks like like a Reaper from Subnautica. But there's a river on the left of that. That's great, but the bad thing is that the area around that, I cannot see. I'm sorry, I'm getting so irate. Man, there's no inlets in east. It looks like there's an inlet, like a little bit kind of surrounding, but the bad thing is it's a waterfall, so you can't enter. The south parts of the map is where you usually enter the interior of the raft. I might build like billboards. I might make like a standard system of rivers and billboards so where you can go, and I might use foundations and fences to block off areas where rafts will get stuck. Because there is a point, like it happened to you in a really nice looking raft. Like I was sailing and it got stuck. That, I think, that'd be arguably a very good idea. Get back, I need to go get my iPad thing. Okay, so the bad thing is the swamp has these like little pegs of wood poking out of the water, and that blocks the area of where you can go in the raft. And yeah, that river channel right there was thick. If I can find a river channel, I might need to I might explore with my raft. I don't know if I need a suicide raft anymore. I have a T-Rex. Basically, some attacks my raft. I'm gonna still keep that little box up just to dedicate my my long start. Alright, I'm gonna take a break and watch this. News chopper gets distracted on live TV. Last moments.
Okay, now he's jumping on another vehicle. Okay. Alright, they're closing in. Looks like they.
Oh my god, Quicksur's almost at mill.
We don't know what has just happened right there. It looks.
On the 27th of July 2007, police in Phoenix, Arizona attempt to pull over a skirted vehicle, a flatbed pickup truck. Before they can accost the driver, however, he puts the truck in reverse and smashes into the police cruiser before taking off. A chase ensues. As word of the chase spread to the area's many news channels, 5 of them dispatched helicopters to film the pursuit. After all, a helicopter is quite an expense for a news channel, and for all the things it can be used to film, police chases tend to attract the most viewers. Morbid curiosity overwhelms the audience, who know that sooner or later, the The chase will come to a conclusion. The question is whether it'll be a peaceful resolution or a tragic one. Viewers of this chase would ultimately end up witnessing tragedy, but not at all in the manner they may have expected. Channel 15 didn't own their own helicopter, but kept one on contract from a company called U.S. Helicopters. It was flown by 17-year veteran Craig Smith, who was accompanied by photographer Rick Krolak, who would operate the chopper's TV camera. Another of the 5 news helicopters in the air that day was owned by Channel 3. It was piloted by 20-year veteran Scott Bowerbank, and its camera was operated by photographer Jim Cox. As the 5 helicopters converged over central Phoenix, they had to request permission from air traffic control to enter the Class B airspace. Normally, this would be followed by close monitoring by air traffic control and strict adherence to their instruction to avoid collision. But, unlike most air traffic, news helicopters all tend to swarm around one location, making it difficult or impossible for air traffic control to keep an eye on all of them and anticipate possible collisions. As such, air traffic control had an agreement with the news stations that they'd be cleared for the airspace under the condition that they operate under visual flight rules, meaning each pilot was responsible for keeping an eye on the sky around them and keeping clear of other craft. This was actually a much bigger problem than you might realize. With a police helicopter already following the chase, that meant there were 6 helicopters in total.
Must have gotten that from that sheet.
Target on the ground. The sky was crowded, to say the least, but that was only one problem. To coordinate the other news choppers, the pilots all had a radio tuned to a common frequency, over which they could announce their presence, location, and movements to other pilots to avoid getting too close.
3 right over you, 15's over top of you. I'm over top of you.
They also had a radio tuned to Phoenix's air traffic control. Nothing out of the ordinary, but Channel 15's Craig Smith and Channel 3's Scott Bowerbank weren't just pilots, they were reporters too. In addition to these 2 radios, they also had one tuned to the police scanner updated on the chase, and another connected to the newsroom. They also had an intercom for communication with their cameramen. On top of juggling communications, they also had to keep an eye on the camera screen so they could see what the cameramen were capturing, as well as the live feed from the newsroom. This already seems like a lot for a pilot.
It is. How long could you have? That's
visuals on multiple nearby helicopters.
Without making a bad video.
Craig Smith and Scott Bowerbank also had to provide running commentary, meaning they had to closely pay attention to what was going on the ground, especially when the suspect left his vehicle to commandeer another one.
Hi, Scott Bowerbank up with News Chopper 3. We're following a police chase that's been going on for about the last 30 minutes here. It's this white truck, flatbed truck you see here with the tank. There's about 24 police cars from the Phoenix Police Department along with the Phoenix Firebird Police helicopter following this guy. It's unknown at this point what he's wanted for. It all started about 30 minutes ago at 7th Street and McDowell. He did try to ram a police car, and we understand, well, he's pulled over right now. He's about to get out, and looks like he's starting to run. Got several units of the Phoenix Police on his tail right here. And Jim states, it looks like he's going to try to take another vehicle here. We'll see if they'll block him in there. Looks like they've got it blocked in there, but he did get that.
Scott Bowerbank's footage and commentary in Channel 3 was abruptly cut off when the Channel 15 helicopter plowed into it, with Bowerbank so transfixed on the action below that he did not see the incoming chopper.
Dude, head-on collision in air?
Channel 15 was much the same as Channel 3's.
Damn.
Craig Smith's exclamation at the end, indicating he had looked up from his console just soon enough to see his impending doom, but too late to prevent it.
Oh, this is all northbound along Central, just south of Indian School. Now he's hitting eastbound, and he just hit some more barricades. Absolutely unbelievable. This guy doesn't care what he hits.
Again, do we know if this truck is stolen?
No, have no idea. All I know is what Firebird reported to me, that apparently the police pulled this vehicle over, and the vehicle then backed into the cruiser. There were no injuries to the police, and just simply took off, and that's how this all ensued.
And it looks like they're probably just going to let this thing play out. Yeah, he can't go much further.
This may be the end of this thing.
So he's taking off running.
Okay, now it's a foot chase.
Okay, now he's jumping into another vehicle.
Okay.
Alright, they're closing in. Looks like they...
Oh,
After colliding,
that's him.
helicopters plummeted to the ground in the steel school park. Both pilots, both photographer photographers were killed. Thankfully, no one turns their attention to the crash site. Many of these men would have known each other personally and would have communicated frequently when they were all up in the air together covering a story like this. Emotions ran high among the remaining reporters.
Turn back around and get away from this. We do have 2 helicopters down during this crash. We're not sure which helicopters they were. Oh my God. It's Channel 3. That's...
The suspect
That poor guy is gonna
was
have
apprehended
PTSD.
shortly after, and with news of the crash of the 2 helicopters covering the story, the Phoenix police chief mentions the possibility of charging him with the 4 deaths. This seems like it may have been a bit of a stretch, however, given the chaotic multitasking the pilots were obligated to perform. With so many helicopters so close by, with each pilot keeping track of so many different things, the pilots basically required to do multiple jobs.
I couldn't do that.
Of piloting aircraft, and an accident seemed inevitable, be it in the course of covering a police chase or a house fire. An investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board closely examined the circumstances leading up to the crash, and it was quickly obvious how such a thing could occur. Flying under visual flight rules requires a pilot's constant attention to the sky, which is obviously not possible if the pilot is also interacting with the newsroom and providing live commentary on a ground target that they are following. This is evident by the fact that 2 pilots were distracted by the drama on the ground as the suspect hijacked another vehicle when the collision occurred. While the National Transportation Safety Board didn't push any legally binding requirements, it did have a number of strong recommendations which were largely taken on board by news stations. Firstly, the pilot should focus on piloting. The duty of reporting should be separate. As such, many news stations now either make use of a co-pilot to handle commentary or just provide commentary from the newsroom. To keep aircraft getting too close, anti-collision LED lights and high visibility markings on rover blades were recommended, as well as minimum separation distances of 200 feet vertically and 500 feet laterally. This issue has only alleviated with time, as improving technology allows cameras greater zooming for better picture quality and further distances. In Phoenix, the news stations began culling their helicopter fleets, with many stations opting to share a single helicopter and provide separate commentary from their respective newsrooms. This practice caught on around the country as stations realized competition to have the best coverage was potentially putting lives at risk, and from a purely pragmatic standpoint, it was simply cheaper to share a helicopter. Looking back, it's astounding to think these measures weren't standard practice from the get-go. You don't see them into much more than common sense, especially when you learn how much the pilots were keeping track of on the day of the crash. It was bordering on madness, and anyone could see it was an accident waiting to happen. As for the suspect, of the 35 crimes he was charged with stemming from the police chase, responsibility for the helicopter crew's deaths were not among them. He pleaded guilty. Ironically, his story is far less dramatic than the one unwittingly created by the men attempting to document it, who in doing so ended up broadcasting on live television their last moments.
Damn.
This may be the end of this thing.
Oh, he's taking off running
Okay,
now.
now it's a foot chase.
Okay, now he's jumped into
Now he's in
another
another
vehicle.
Okay.
Alright, they're closing in. Looks like they've... We don't know what has just happened right there.
That was weird. Damn it! Try to cut these trees out, that way what just happened doesn't happen again. Thank God I caught that. What happens if you hit by sonar? What?
Imagine you're diving in the ocean. Don't know what you're doing there, to be honest, but you're engulfed in the big blue. Then, out of nowhere, maybe in front of you, maybe behind you, maybe above or below you, a large shadow appears, hundreds of times bigger than you. It's a submarine. Holy gods, that's terrifying. Even scarier is the thought that at any time they could turn on the active sonar. Something that probably wouldn't even cross your mind, but that would be very bad for you. So, what actually happens if you get hit by sonar? Sonar is a navigation technique that uses sound to detect one's surroundings and measure distances. It's used by some animals like dolphins and whales, and its first recorded use by humans dates back to 1490 and was credited to Leonardo da Vinci. That fella's always up to something.
This motherfucker don't miss.
No, he's fucking good.
That motherfucker don't miss, man.
He's good.
There are two types of sonar, passive sonar and active sonar. Passive sonar is basically just the act of listening for sounds, so you can detect things like fish or other vessels. Active sonar is what you're interested in, and involves emitting a sound from a transmitter and using the receiver to pick up the sound reflections of objects. Sonar is used by both surface vessels and submersibles, with civilians and military. You might think sonar is a little sounds like in the movies, although a sonar technician is more likely to refer to it as a pulse than a ping. Or you might even think it's at a frequency undetectable by humans. The truth is, sonar comes in a wide range of frequencies and can vary in its intensity depending on what equipment is being used and for what purpose. But it can be incredibly loud to travel great distances. You can find videos on YouTube of divers apparently being hit by sonar.
That is ear-piercing.
Now these are just videos on YouTube, so we'll have to take them with a grain of salt. But the people posting these videos all seem to say the same thing. The sonar's sudden arrival in the otherwise peaceful ocean is very frightening, and it's also very loud. You can feel it in your body. It's important to note that no submarine or any other vessel can be spotted in these videos, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, this type of active sonar can travel great distances, and remember, sound travels much faster and further through water than air. Two, sonar operators are generally very careful of where they use high-intensity sonar, due to its effect on marine life and divers nearby. They usually only do it miles away from the coast, and because this kind of sonar gives away their position, which is kind of the opposite of what you want to be doing in a submarine, if you can hear it, they're probably just testing the equipment for training operators. Here's a few examples of what different types of sonar sounds like.
Jesus, that is loud as hell. Can you imagine hearing that in the ocean? That is horror right
So
there.
how loud can sonar get? Well, it's actually up there with the loudest sounds in the world. The US Navy, for example, has sonar emitters that can generate up to 235 decibel pressure waves. These sound waves can travel for hundreds of miles underwater. Even 300 miles away from the source, they can be as loud as 140 decibels,
Jesus
depending
Christ.
on the conditions of the water. So, if you can see the vessel when it's using that kind of active sonar, you're in a lot of trouble. 100 decibels is around when your hearing can start being damaged, and 120 is around when the sound starts to become painful. At such high sound levels, the intensity of the sound can create significant pressure changes in the water, creating something that's more akin to a sharp wave than a normal sound wave, almost like a bomb blast. At 200 decibels, the vibrations from these pressure waves can rupture your lungs, and that's no good. Decibels are not measured on a linear scale, but a logarithmic one.
Which means they get
So an
stronger
increase
the
of
more they
10
go.
decibels corresponds to approximately double the perceived loudness. At 210 decibels, the vibrations will be enough to hemorrhage your brain tissue, and that's definitely not good at all. So if you are too close to a boat using high-intensity active sonar, the pressure waves could rupture your organs, and it's a pretty terrible way to die. Thankfully, it's extremely unlikely to occur, and there are no records of anyone ever being killed in this manner. But even hundreds of miles away, it can still be enough to cause painful hearing loss and induce nausea and dizziness. Thankfully, submarines and other vessels have various methods of deploying sonar, including ultrasonic, which would be undetectable to humans. The use of high-intensity sonar is fairly limited for the reasons mentioned earlier. It gives away their position in a big way, and they're aware of how damaging it could be for nearby life. In fact, in scenarios where a vessel is reported and maybe threatened by underwater divers with explosive charges, high-intensity active sonar is considered a possible means of defense. So even though it's possible, it's pretty much implausible that you would never be hurt by active sonar. They're just
My God, move!
this stuff, and your chances of coming across a military submarine are very slim. They typically operate in remote areas and dense zones that watch recreational divers. Although I think even just hearing sonar can be terrifying. Even when it's so far away, it doesn't do any damage. The underwater soundscape is probably pretty
You know what?
calm, 99.9.
Get out of my way.
Of the time. The most you're gonna hear
I'm murdering you.
is water moving. Then, out of nowhere, a loud
Just die. Stupid Diplodocus, whatever the hell your name is.
As animals like whales will swim hundreds of miles to get away from the sound of active sonar. Some cause themselves injury or death by beaching themselves or rapidly changing depths in severe depression sickness as a result. Put yourself in a whale shoes, flesh or whatever. Imagine one day we're all just chilling on Earth like we always are, and then suddenly we get hit by a terrible sound or blinding light by some alien species that are technologically advanced to the point of basically being gods to us. And the reason they did it was part of some experiment or operation beyond our comprehension. They didn't even mean to cause us harm, nor do they even really care. It's just a byproduct of something else they were doing. If aliens exist and have the same level of consideration for Earth as we do, we're in a lot of trouble. And you're in a lot of trouble right now, if you haven't subscribed, that is. You see, I've made a lot of videos and continue to make them every week. So if you enjoyed this one, you can watch some more from my catalog or subscribe to see future releases. We're close to 1 million, so I would appreciate it. And who doesn't want to be part of that journey, the road to 1 million? So
I cannot wait. This guy deserves more subs than he already has.
any brakes? Well, it probably does, but I don't really know how to operate a train. Anyways, I'll see you next week. Until then, stay safe.
Highest radiation dose.
Use plastic pop is enormous. We break them down into their molecular components, and
That way they can be spread easier.
This means Albert Stevens survived the highest known accumulated rate.
Mr. Steven.
You're exposed to high doses of radiation. Just like that. You hadn't even planned on being irradiated that day, but now you are. Imagine not expecting to be highly irradiated, but then
Oh my
suddenly
God.
highly irradiated. Actually, I guess that's probably how it happens to the vast majority of people who get radiation poisoning now. unfortunate souls that this man was subjected to the highest known accumulated radiation dose in human history. And he survived.
And apparently he didn't know about it either.
May not have been fatal for him. What happened to this guy is really messed up and sad. And not in the way that you're probably thinking. In the USA in the 1940s, research and development was underway for the production of the first nuclear bombs. Famously, this research is known as the Manhattan Project. And sure enough, it did see the development of the first nuclear bombs, the use of which is credited with ending World War II for the US and changing the world forever. Even today, the power of nuclear weapons looms over the world, threatening to destroy it. How many conflicts and wars do you think we've avoided just because the threat of nukes being involved was too great? On the flip side, how close do you think we've come to totally annihilating the planet with the things? This is important to consider because I want you to think about how influential the people who worked on the Manhattan Project are.
I'm going to die because this dinosaur really flings me off of this paratherasium.
Since these minds came up with the nuclear bomb. And I'm going to say nukes are still going to be a huge influence on the world by then. That's one hell of a thing to create. These minds were on the cutting edge of science. But science is kind of a funny thing.
Not that time.
Why? Well, imagine I asked you to create a nuclear bomb. I've supplied all the materials necessary, don't ask where I got them from, and provided a small workforce who will carry out your commands. Don't ask where I got them from. You're not locked up in a room or anything. You can go out and read up in the library or look things up on the internet or whatever. Okay, now how confident are you that you could build a working nuclear bomb given these very favorable conditions? Chances are, not very. It's a complicated task. You don't even know what you don't know. But the people on the Manhattan Project didn't have your advantages. They had to figure out everything by themselves. There was no internet. There wasn't even any nuclear bombs. How the hell were they supposed to create something that never existed ever? They were literally making the first one. What I'm trying to say is, these people were probably pretty clever. Okay, now imagine I've given you plutonium. I've just handed it to you and said...
I say no, I'm not dealing with it. Plutonium is hella dangerous.
Well, it's radioactive, right? You might not know a lot about it.
The boogeyman of the periodic table. No, I don't want to have any of that stuff.
This is the funny part of science, because back during the Manhattan Project research, the effects of plutonium exposure were largely unknown. So those geniuses that invented the nuclear bomb, you know, the one that you couldn't even copy after decades of technological advancement, these guys were going wild with plutonium, just getting silly with it. They were unintentionally contaminating everything with it, accidentally inhaling the dust, tracking it into civilian areas. One chemist even accidentally swallowed the stuff. For days after, his breath could be picked up by radiation detectors from
My God.
Now these guys weren't stupid. Plutonium had only just been discovered in 1940. The effects of it on the human body were not known. That doesn't mean they didn't think it did anything to you, they just didn't know what exactly it did. Having to handle so much of it led to some concerns in the Manhattan Project over what the effects might be. And so a program was initiated with the aim of tracing the course of plutonium through the body. In 1944, early tests with rats indicated plutonium concentrated itself in the bones and seemed to stay there for a long time.
Yeah. And then they irradiate your bones, and just basically, it just gets, goes to hell there.
For human tests, and 3 test sites were chosen: Manhattan Project Army Hospital in Oak Ridge, Billings Hospital in Chicago, and University of California Hospital in San Francisco. Over the course of these experiments, 18 people aged 4 to 69 were injected with plutonium. One of these people was Albert Stevens, a 58-year-old house painter who arrived at the University of California Hospital complaining of stomach pains. He was diagnosed with advanced stomach cancer. Like many of the test subjects, Stevens was chosen because the illness he was originally in the hospital for was terminal. He only had 6 months to live. This meant the experiments could be performed on him without much care for how it turned out.
Hey, you about to die? Oh, okay.
So who
Here.
cares? Oh,
We'll irradiate you
subjects
plutonium.
weren't told they were being experimented on? Yep, Albert Stevens was injected with plutonium without his knowledge. Why? Well, it was 1945. Very few people knew anything about plutonium, so it would have been difficult to explain all this to the average Joe in order to get his consent. More importantly, the experiment was tied to a top-secret military project during
Which,
the biggest
yeah, they didn't
and
want
deadliest
to.
war
They want
in
to keep
history.
hush hush on that.
Ethics weren't that high up on the priority list. Apparently, even some of the hospital staff involved with the experiments didn't know what was going on. A few days after being
Classic.
injected with plutonium, Albert Stevens underwent surgery for his stomach
Oh my
cancer.
God.
Surgeons removed part of his stomach, liver, spleen, lymph nodes, pancreas, and ribs to stop the spread of cancer. These were sent to the lab to study the effects of the plutonium. It was in this lab that it was discovered that Stevens hadn't got cancer at all, but a benign gastric ulcer, meaning all that stuff that was cut out of him was for nothing. Well,
Oh.
except furthering the studies of plutonium exposure, of course. To this end, Stevens also supplied urine and stool samples to be studied, and when Stevens recovered from his surgery and was discharged from the hospital, he continued to collect samples at their request, and workers would come by his house and pick them up. You see, Stevens was never told he didn't actually have cancer, and workers were still collecting his samples for nearly a year after the surgery under the pretense that they were researching his miraculous recovery. Although his family
That
did
is so
become
bad.
suspicious of the continued sample collecting, they thought he might have been sort of a guinea pig for a new form of cancer treatment that was highly effective. So not only did this guy have a significant portion of his insides removed, and not
You know he
only
got
was he injected
gutted like a
with
frickin'
plutonium
pumpkin.
without his knowledge, but the reason for both those things was entirely bogus. With no cancer, that surgery should have never been performed at all, and with no terminal illness, Stevens was incorrectly chosen for the experiment. Not that having a terminal illness would make this in any way ethical, because, just in case I forgot to mention this, he wasn't told any of this. So what happens to Albert Stevens after being injected with plutonium?
If you're gonna experiment on someone,
Not
just
much,
at least
actually.
pay
For
them.
another 20 years. At some point, 10 years after the injection, a radiologist noted rather marked degeneration of parts of Stevens' spine, consistent with previous findings that plutonium accumulates in the bones. Other than that, there doesn't seem to have been any noteworthy
No biggie,
incidents
just a
regarding
little bit
his health.
plutonium.
He died in 1966 of heart disease at the age of 79. Upon analysis of his remains, it was found that Stevens had accumulated an effective radiation dose of 64 sieverts.
Jesus
so an average
Christ.
injury per year.
By the way, like I think like one microsievert is where you start to get sick. 1 and 2 is where you start to get sick. Actually, 5, done, dead. You're basically put in the forever box once you go past 5. This damn dude accumulated 64 damn sieverts. That is a lot of radiation for a person, for one man.
Annual permitted dose for radiation workers in the US today is 0.05 sieverts, around 60 times less than Stevens had to endure. A single dose of 4 to 5 sieverts would prove fatal about 50% of the time, and a single dose of 10 sieverts would be more than enough to kill you. This means Albert Stevens survived the highest known accumulated radiation dose in history, and he didn't even know it. Nor did anyone else. As you can imagine, this research was kept secret for quite a long time, until it was uncovered in the 1990s, making Stevens' unintentional world record famous about 30 years after his death. Again, he had no clue any of this happened, nor did any of the other people unknowingly subjected to the human radiation experiments. But you know, a good number of them did have terminal illnesses, and were dead not too long after anyways. Just as planned. It should be noted that none of the subjects died from plutonium. So I guess you could say it all worked out in the end. Sure, some people got injected with radioactive material without their consent, but is that so wrong? I mean, if it's for the advancement of science and the benefit of mankind, small amount of LSD, or even a pinch of our good old friend Agent Orange, and if the powers that be who, let's not forget, were elected by you and I under the glorious tradition of democracy as the most fit representatives of the good people, were to, let's say, research the effects of subliminal programming through modern multimedia, would that be a tragedy? I mean, just imagine all the people who would benefit from such research.
Yeah, how many grams of plutonium was dumped into this man's body? I have to know that. That dude is a literal walking bar of plutonium. That guy probably had to be lead casket. Oh, wow, there's a little box over there. That guy had to probably be buried in a lead casket. Nope. I invited you. The party system has changed, by the way. Murder. He's gonna walk slow. Hey, Baba, you might not want to look at this Paraceratherium. That dude's beefy. You there? What? I don't know. By the way, my Paraceratherium just like hit a snake and it went flying in front of my T-Rex and I just murked it. Anyway, dude, I just got Call of Duty last night. This guy's like white FAG. And you know, if this guy's like, this dude's talking and the bottom for 11 kills. And you all know what his ratio was? 11 to like 34. That means every time he killed somebody in the game, he died like 3 times. His rate, I'm like, dude, your ratio is at STFU. And I started laughing as I did that. The conspiracy theorist who predicted his own death.
Flu season is here. Get your flu
Oh,
shot
God.
Hy-Vee today and get a 20-cent Hy-Vee fuel saver.
Only 20 cents. Yeah, right, fuel.
Milton William Cooper, also known as Bill Cooper, is perhaps one of, if not the most influential figure in modern-day conspiracy theory. He's no longer with us to continue to give us his spin on the world, but many of the leading names in conspiracy theory today have followed in his footsteps. So much so that, in hearing about him, you'd probably think he was the guy behind all those dubious articles you saw on Facebook earlier today. His theories and predictions range from the ridiculously outlandish to the true. Yeah, some of the things this guy predicted really materialized, including his own death. Born in 1943 in California, Cooper joined the military after high school and served in the Navy in Vietnam. It was here he claimed to have seen top-secret documents while working as part of the briefing team under Admiral Bernard A. Clary, who commanded the Navy's Pacific Fleet. According to Cooper, these documents reveal the existence of collusion between the United States government and extraterrestrials to take over the world. Yes, in this video I will be making heavy use of the terms according to, allegedly, and claims, because it's very hard to figure out what is real and what is not in the world of conspiracy, for some people at least. So I believe what you believe in, up to you. Also contained within these documents were a vast array of other alarming government conspiracies. For instance, JFK had not been killed by Lee Harvey Oswald at all, but instead by his driver using a gas.
That's actually a very common. That's a really common theory I've ever heard of. Is that the driver in the back actually killed JFK, not the sniper? I'm personally with the sniper thing. Because that's usually, like, if someone had, that's the most preferred way to kill a public official, is a snipe, not go up really close.
Aliens. Seems like a lot of work when they could have just, used a gun from a concealed position far away.
Yeah.
Regardless, it sure was good of the government to put all these documents together.
It was being filmed, so why would you, like, be point blank and kill a president?
About what the government was doing. Well, it's only right. And intended to contact a reporter. Around the same time, he was involved in an accident when his motorcycle allegedly hit a black limousine. This resulted in his right leg being amputated above the knee. In the hospital, Cooper claims he was visited by two men who asked him if he'd learned his lesson, presumably the occupants of the black limo trying to cow him into silence. Cooper told them that he had indeed learned his lesson, but internally he knew the lesson was in fact not learned, and that the information had to get out. By the 80s, Cooper had begun getting involved in the UFO scene, which would be receptive to his claims. Of course, the UFO theorists were mostly concerned with sightings and abductions and the occasional unconsenting probe, but Cooper's theories focused more around the government and their impending world domination than the saucy green boys, adding a new dimension to ufology. He published a number of essays, wrote into UFO magazines, and started giving lectures. It was here he met the owner of a publishing company, who Cooper convinced to publish a book that he would write, detailing all his theories. And so, 3 years later, in
the Theory Bible.
1991...
No, stop! Jesus, stop! No! Stop, Siri!
Behold, a Pale Horse was
Jesus
published.
Christ, I hate
Here,
that.
Cooper expanded upon his theory that the government was in contact with an alien race. The world was actually ruled by the Illuminati, who were in turn being controlled by the aliens. The aliens' plan was to turn a portion of Earth's population into slave labor, and for this to work smoothly, the Illuminati would need to bring in a single global government.
Oh my God.
The New World Order. The book theories is they're usually so complicated and complex, it takes weeks to research the many deep and branching rabbit holes and hours to explain to someone else. So I'll just name some of the theories and concepts if you'd like to look into them for yourself. One world government, man-made AIDS, protocols of the Elders of Zion, the Bilderberg Group, the Knights Templar, Freemasons, Majestic 12, the Trilateral Commission, etc., etc. Maybe I should do a series where I look into individual conspiracies, but for this video I simply just do not have the time to go into all of this. You might think it all sounds crazy, but Cooper does explicitly state his conclusions may be wrong, and his intent is only to convince you that none of us know the truth about this world, and everyone should do their own research and search for that truth. Behold, A Pale Horse slowly became an underground bestseller, and Cooper began hosting a show on shortwave radio called The Hour of the Time. As the UFO scene lost popularity, Cooper began to rethink his theories on aliens, started to suspect aliens were merely a cover story or a red herring for the Illuminati. As such, his theories became even more
always the Illuminati.
totalitarian governments and police states. This began to attract the attention of
We're
the
fed up with the
movement
feds.
of the 90s.
I am
One
too.
fan of Cooper's being Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma bomber. He's come up in a few videos now, and really should make an episode on him. Anyways, after the Oklahoma bombing, FBI agents came to Cooper's house to ask him some questions, as McVeigh had ordered a videotape about the Waco siege from Cooper. I do have an episode on the Waco siege, by the way. Having the FBI show up to his house did not please Cooper, and he was beginning to suspect he was at the center of some sort of plan to silence him.
It's probably
This,
gonna
of
get...
course, only bolstered his beliefs and furthered his commitment to spreading his theories. You may never have heard of Bill Cooper, but I'm willing to bet you probably think he sounds a lot like some media figure you know of today, when it seems like conspiracy theories are more prevalent than ever. Bill Cooper was like a forerunner to people like Alex Jones. Ironically, the two had a little feud after Cooper said Alex Jones' theories were bullshit. Now, you may be thinking that all sounds like bullshit, but not all of Cooper's predictions were so outlandish. He noticed the rising trend of prescribing drugs like Prozac and Ritalin to kids and teenagers, and worried it would lead to a rash of school shootings, which in turn would be used as an excuse by the government to take away citizens' arms. That was 8 years before the Columbine school shooting. He also predicted a massive tragedy would occur in the US, and the blame would be pinned on Osama bin Laden.
Oh my God!
Foreign countries, bombing campaigns, and increased surveillance on American citizens. That was 2 months before 9/11.
Holy hell! Oh my God! Oh my God! That is creepy as hell. Damn, dude had it pinned! Oh my God! Dude literally predict... I mean, I'm not really a big believer in superstition, like, you know, like, the ability to predict events that much, but... Oh my God! Man literally predicted 9/11. Damn. That is scary. Like, almost to a point where, like, come on, repeat that again.
Worried it would lead to a rash of school shootings, which in turn would be used as an excuse by the government to take away citizens' arms. That was 8 years before the Columbine school shooting. He also predicted a massive tragedy would occur in the US and the blame would be pinned on Osama bin Laden. This would lead to war in foreign countries, bombing campaigns, increased surveillance on American citizens. That was 2 months before 9/11.
That
means we should all seriously consider his more far-fetched theories, or maybe it means a broken clock is right twice a day. Cooper also managed to predict his own death, although that one is a little less impressive considering you kind of have direct control over the outcome. You know, you wouldn't be too amazed if I predicted I'd die a week from now, and then in 7 days I went off to play in traffic.
What did he know?
After 9/11, Cooper became ever more paranoid, reclusive, and belligerent. His wife left with his daughters. Although Cooper claimed he had moved them out of the country for their safety, he was sure the government was moving for total control, and he would be silenced for his resistance. He had previously believed he was being targeted by Bill Clinton himself, although we all know old Bill was preoccupied with other matters. He now believed the IRS were out to get him, although this
IRS was out
to his taxes, so once again, not really a great prediction there. For his alleged tax evasion, there was a warrant out for Cooper's arrest since 1998, but he had eluded multiple attempts to serve it. Authorities sort of let him get away with it because they knew he wasn't going to go down without a fight. Cooper told his audience that he was aware he was a hunted man and that he was soon going to be shot dead. His house was on a hilltop that gave him a view of incoming vehicles, and Cooper was suspicious of anyone coming up that street. People would often drive up for the view, but Cooper would often accost them, suspecting them of spying on him or trying to intimidate him. Once he followed one of these people home and threatened them with a gun.
Damn.
Allegedly. And this is when the authorities decided they needed to act. The sheriff's office issued a warrant for Cooper's arrest on suspicion of aggravated assault, but again, they were worried about Cooper's volatility, allegedly. In November 2001, they decided they would draw Cooper out by posing as another annoying group of people around Cooper's property, parking their car not far away and playing loud music. And sure enough, Cooper came out in his truck, but he sensed something was off, and instead of trying to shoo them away as he usually did, he turned tail. The deputies gave chase. Allegedly. When he reached his driveway, Cooper got out of his truck and made for his front door, firing at the deputies and striking one in the head, mortally wounding him. The deputies fired back. Cooper was struck 9 times and killed on his doorstep, just as he had predicted. Of course, many dispute this version of events and claim Cooper was assassinated. Indeed, his death galvanized his support and cemented his legacy as a martyr. Even his old nemesis Alex Jones would go on to praise him as a genius, saying he looked into his work after his death.
Alex
Found
Jones.
it to be amazing.
And then I listened to Bill Cooper, and it was like incredible stuff about 9/11
Dude, every time
coming and like all this really smart stuff. I was like, God, I know this guy was just as smart.
And that's the tale of Milton William Cooper.
I cannot with
Whether
Alex
you think
Jones.
he was
Alex
a
Jones
paranoid
is just
crackpot
different.
Or a revolutionary is up to you.
He literally claims that there's a crystal skull in the Memphis Bass Pro Shop pyramid that is controlling everybody for the far left agenda. I am not joking. That. Oh my god, this is why I cannot stand politicians. They are just crazy. Oh my god, there's a sarcosuchus. That is...
Maybe you'll go off and investigate his conspiracy theories in more depth, or maybe you'll dismiss the whole thing as nonsense. The only thing I can guarantee is both sides will somehow find something to attack me for in the comments. Fucking pissants. All I'm to say is, if you'd like to see more absolutely fantastic videos made by a charming, handsome man, subscribe. because I'm putting out that quality content every goddamned week. Allegedly.
This plague, the rioting is intensifying to the point where we may not be able to contain it.
Why contain it? Let it spill over to the schools and churches. Let the bodies pile up in the streets. In the end, they'll beg us to save them.
I've received reports of armed attacks on shipments. There's not enough vaccine to go around, and the underclasses are starting to get desperate.
God. A broken arrow incident. How the U.S. has broken arrow incidents, I don't get it. That's a stupid thing to happen. What is broken arrow? Broken arrow basically means that the United States, and you're not gonna believe this has happened, has lost a nuclear warhead, has accidentally detonated it, or has accidentally launched it, whatever. The accidental misuse or loss of a nuclear weapon. This has actually happened at least 83 times. There's nuclear cores. I know one, there's 2 nuclear cores in the Mediterranean that are just lost.
So powerful that using them on this planet is basically unviable. A nuclear war would be absolutely catastrophic for all involved parties and probably all uninvolved parties as well. The creation of the nuke has probably more than anything else guaranteed there'll never be a World War III. Or if there is, there'll never be a World War IV, because there'll be no one left to fight it, and nothing left to fight over. Not that I particularly care about that. The sooner this planet and everybody on it goes to hell, the better as far as I'm concerned. And today we'll be looking at some of the times that almost happened. Of course, during the Cold War, there were many fears that escalating aggression would lead to planetary annihilation. There were a few incidents where one side or another seemed to be attempting to provoke a reaction, such as the Cuban Missile Crisis. But today we'll be looking not at acts of aggression, but at accidents. And the US military has a few different terms that it uses to describe incidents involving nuclear materials. For example, bent spear incidents are breaches of security or handling protocols, such as in 2007, when the United States Air Force mistakenly loaded 6 nuclear warheads onto a B-52H before a flight, and then they remained on the plane for 36 hours without the proper storage or security protections that are mandatory.
How does that happen?
Dull sword incidents occur when equipment or systems intended for use with nuclear weapons are damaged or impaired, but no actual nukes are present at the time of the incident. So, if a transport vehicle was out of action the day before a nuke was supposed to be moved or something. Nuke flash refers to incidents involving nuclear weapons which could provoke a nuclear war. So, for instance, if a missile detection system erroneously detects an incoming attack, which prompts the preparation of a return attack. Unsettlingly, this has actually happened a few times in history, but the men in charge of these systems had the presence of mind to trust their gut and not immediately open fire. Obviously, nuke flash are the most threatening incidents, and really each one is deserving of its own video. Instead, in this video, we will be looking at every single broken arrow incident, that is, every nuclear weapons accident that does not create the risk of nuclear war. This includes accidental detonations and loss of weapons. So if the US accidentally detonated a nuke in Russia, that would be a nuke flash incident, because that could potentially cause nuclear war. But if the US accidentally